Have you ever walked away from an argument wondering, why did that escalate so quickly? So many of us grew up walking around with unhealthy communication patterns like defensiveness, avoidance, criticism, emotional shutdown, or emotional explosions. And it affects our marriages, parenting, friendships, and stress levels more than we realize. Today, we're talking about how to handle conflict in healthier ways without making relationships worse or losing yourself in the process. Stay tuned. Welcome to Fulfillment Therapy. I'm Kendra Nielson, wife, mom, and licensed therapist. Do you ever feel like you're doing everything right, but you're still exhausted and empty? Did you think life, marriage, and parenting would be simpler and more rewarding? Sometimes you just want to crawl back into bed and lose yourself in screen time and chocolate, rather than face that personal or family stress. You are not alone. This podcast helps you break free of the rat race and build a richer, more meaningful life, flourishing incrementally and realistically, improving your mental health and wellness, and living with deeper purpose beyond the mundane, no matter where you are in life's journey. Welcome back, my friends, to Fulfillment Therapy. Today we had a listener email me and ask some questions because, again, several of you are a little gun-shy about coming on the podcast. And this is something that keeps coming up, and I have specific requests to go a little further than what I gave you before, so that is what I am doing for today. This listener asked for more help with conflict resolution, and I know that doesn't even fully convey it because we say like, oh yeah, I totally know how to work through conflict. But let me ask you this. How well do you work with conflict with your partner? Give it your spouse, your partner, boyfriend, girlfriend. If they were here, would they say, yeah, they never get defensive, they bring things up calmly, they don't shut down, they don't pursue, they're not doing all these things? Would the answer be like, yeah, they've got it nailed? Or would it be, no, we don't talk about things because neither of us want to fight or argue, so we just let it go. But then we have resentments over time. If this is you, whether it's with your spouse, your partner, your friends, your family members, congratulations, you're human, and we have more that we can work on today to help you with that. So listen up. A lot of people feel ashamed for how they respond during conflict, and I was definitely one of those people. So I wrote down a bunch of notes so I didn't forget. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to refer to them so I don't forget a lot of these things that I wanted you to remember for today. Let me jump into her questions and some of those things that I asked and some of those things that I wanted to share with you. Before I ask her questions, she asked, I believe it was 10 to 12 of them, and I'll answer those today. I think she did a great job at articulating some of her concerns that many of my clients talk about as well. But I want you to remember too, as we're going over this, that conflict itself is not unhealthy. And I have a couple stories about that where it can go really well. The issue is how the conflict gets handled. A lot of parents and partners are carrying a lot of stress or resentment, like I mentioned, or defensiveness, maybe people pleasing. They're shutting down. They're emotionally reactive. And these things often begin without us even really realizing it. Go a little bit more into why and what to do about it. Remember, healthy conflict is not about becoming perfect at communication. I'm not there either. It's about learning how to stay connected, emotionally safe, and respectful, even during difficult conversations. I want to start with one story because I love stories so much, and then I'll get into her first question. We have these close friends that we were going to go on a trip with, our first trip with these friends, and somehow there was a miscommunication. I think maybe I thought that it was open to invite other people, and so I invited some somewhat mutual friends that I thought that they knew and they didn't as much, and they called back a little later and they're like, hey, could we talk for a minute? And we're like, yeah, of course. We were both on the phone. They just said, we're not overly comfortable with that couple coming. We don't really know them very well. And they just asked questions and like, we don't really want to make it an issue or anything. And we don't want to make it weird for you, but we would just rather it be people that we know really well, and it can be a good vacation and worthwhile for both of us. Now, this makes so much sense. And I was so appreciative. After that moment, I felt so much closer to them. Now, they could have handled that a different way. They could have been kind of passive aggressive and just been like, oh, yeah, it's fine, it's fine. But then been kind of short or snappy or not responding to my texts. That happens to a lot of friends, right? Or it could have been very aggressive and like, I can't believe you would go and schedule this with these other people without talking to us first. And obviously, we don't even know them really well. Like, why would you think that's okay? You all know some rendition of the aggressive type or the passive aggressive type and what this could look like. So how do you respond to people if you feel confused or hurt or upset? And could you challenge this? The thing I love about these friends is they often show that curiosity. And I'll talk about some of these things in a minute. Or they give me the benefit of the doubt and they see the good in you and they just want to work through it quickly. And it's like a non-issue. So that is conflict, but it doesn't feel like conflict because conflict is such a heavy word. But it can be relatively simple to work through if you practice some of these things. And I promise you, you're going to need to practice because most of us have not grown up with good role models on how to do this. It's not something that's taught often enough. And I know I've talked a lot about this, but there's a reason I talk about it because so many of us struggle with this. Again, myself included. So let's jump into those questions. Here's our first one. What if I never saw healthy conflict growing up and honestly don't know what normal looks like? I just mentioned this. You're not alone, first of all. So Jen, I completely get this. And there are so many resources now that there never were before, from this podcast to my courses to YouTube videos, all of it. There's no reason we can't get the tools now that we need and some guidance on how to do that, whether that's coaching from me or therapy or whether that's from another therapist, whoever. There's things that we can do, but down a little bit. Most of us learn through observation and not this formal teaching, like if you were to take a class or go look at these things yourself or ask AI for tips on this. And most of the things we learn are unhealthy patterns. Like maybe you observed yelling or criticism or emotional withdrawal or passive aggressiveness or avoidance, maybe intimidation or pretending that everything is fine. These are ones that I notice with a lot of my clients. These become wired into our nervous system and they become our superhighways in our brain, like those neural pathways. But as we know, our brains have neuroplasticity, meaning they can change. They can be trained to see things, to do things differently, but it does take practice. I can tell you after years of being a therapist, I am still practicing this. I'm still learning to work through these things. And that's largely why marriage wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, because I was used to doing things myself and it wasn't modeled for me before. So I got by as well as I could, but I had to learn how to see this done right. And that's no discredit to my mom. She did the best that she could. And my dad died early, so that may have happened to you, where you didn't have both parents in the home to model that. And by the time she got remarried, he was not at all good at conflict resolution. And it was very much about criticizing, blaming, shaming, raising your voice, intimidating, being aggressive, none of which was healthy to model. And so I shut down watching that play out. So maybe that's you. Maybe your story is a little different, but either way, chances are high, if you're listening to this, that either you or your partner or somebody else you love with conflict struggles with this as well. So what does healthy communication look like? I'm sure some of these you will know, maybe not all of them. It's emotional regulation. It's listening, not interrupting. It's more accountability and ownership. Absolutely. It's also creating boundaries. I talk a lot about that. And that is not punishment, but that is just to help clarify and to get very clear on what you value, what you need, because you're both so very different no matter who that other person is. And it's about repair and curiosity, like my friend showed. Disagreement does not equal rejection. That's something hard that I had to learn. It doesn't mean that he loved me any less. It just meant we had to work through things. And emotional health can absolutely be learned later in life. I want to share a win that my husband and I had. I think this was just yesterday, actually. We have couples counsel every Sunday. We sit down and plan the week, and then we talk about wins and struggles, things that we want to improve and be more mindful of. And I have asked him again and again to just share with me in a setting outside of the escalated situation and just share it kind of matter of factly, or where he's not escalated, where he can just share his concerns and just focus on that thing and not make it so big and heavy and overwhelming and full of what feels like shame, but just simply state the concern and maybe a tiny bit of suggestions, but leaving space for me to explore that too. And he nailed it so well on Sunday. And what he did is he said something like, I'm a little concerned that we're backtracking because I'm trying to remember what the event was. Oh, I signed up my kids for horseback riding lessons. And we had been having ongoing conversations about this for many weeks as I was doing a bunch of research, trying to find different things for my kids to do during the summer that would be beneficial for them instead of just sitting around and wanting to be on screens and different things. So having positive outlets and not just being home all the time or being out with friends all the time. And we had lots of dialogue. So I thought, oh, okay, he knows we're on the same page. And I received an email like, sign up, this is going to fill up quickly. So I immediately signed up for the entire summer. And in my mind, I'm like, oh, good, we've got that done. I've been talking to my husband. But his feedback for me was, this is a pattern. Sometimes you get an idea in your mind, you talk about it a few times, and then you don't clarify with me before jumping in. And he's correct. So I did not come back and say, hey, I just got the sign up for horseback riding lessons, and I'm going to sign up the 2 kids for that throughout the summer. This is the cost. This is what's needed from both you and I for rides. This is how far it is. So it doesn't matter exactly what the thing is, but this is the conflict. Now, he in the past could have been really frustrated, and he could have responded with passive aggressiveness and just been short with me and not wanted me near, or just treated me a little bit poorly, anything like that. Or he could have been really aggressive and really just laid into me like, you did this again. I can't believe this. We all have this happen on some level, either too passive, too aggressive, something in between. And instead, he just stuck to our couples inventory each week. And he just said, hey, he just kept it light. And he's, hey, I'm just a little concerned. This is what happened. And since we had already talked about it a little bit, I knew, and I was in the space at that point to take ownership, to say, you know what, you're right. I absolutely didn't follow through. It felt so easy because there wasn't that weight, that shame. I committed to doing better, and we were able to work through it so quickly and so easily. But that has taken a while. And remember how I talked about neuroplasticity? Well, this is a perfect example. It's taken me quite a while to practice it because I didn't exactly know what part we were tripping over again and again. I had ideas, but it comes down to this. So many of those things that I just listed, this is what's happening more and more with practice over time. And we all need that practice. Now, maybe you're different than your spouse. Maybe you just keep everything bottled and you don't express it. Maybe you get more bitter and resentful and just criticize. Any of those things that I shared with you, there's space for improvement. Hopefully that helps you a little bit. Remember, you're not doomed to repeat every emotional pattern you've inherited. So just because you didn't have the best model, you can change it now, and you probably have intuitively picked up on some of these things already. All right, now for question number 2. How do you handle conflict without shutting down or blowing up? This is a great question, and honestly, I didn't even realize that I was shutting down. When I would do it, that would be generally how I would respond, unless those resentments had built over time. And I noticed that with my clients too. It's often one or the other that they seem to favor, but it can also be both. So do you shut down or do you blow up in your conflicts? And I want you to think about, again, not just your partner, but maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's a friend. Maybe it's somebody in a community group, like at the gym or at church, and you are just responding this typical way every time. It's really easy to respond that way when we're activated. So we go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we've talked about these before. When our nervous system is activated and thinks that there's a threat, so you can either become emotionally reactive or emotionally disappear, even dissociate. And often neither of these is intentional. This is when we are emotionally flooded. It's okay to be flooded. I've also mentioned this before, but my husband and I take much different times to recover from some of those things. And it just depends on what it is. Some triggers are very sensitive and those take a little bit longer. Some are not that big of a deal. But often I take longer to process and really examine what's mine and what somebody else's. Not like excessive amounts of time, but I do take a little bit longer because I want to be certain. And my husband can talk about it in a few minutes generally, or maybe sometimes he thinks he can. And over time, I'm learning he needs a little longer too. So take that for what it's worth. Here are just a few tips you can use to help you with conflict. Pause before responding. Slow your tone and your pace. So low and slow. That helps a lot. I say that in my mind over and over sometimes when I'm feeling activated myself. Notice physical cues. Is your heart racing? Is your jaw clenched? Do you want to interrupt? Do you want to run away? So normalize that and take a time out. This is the best thing I can do as long as it doesn't become a weapon. Do you notice yourself wanting to shut down? Do you notice yourself wanting to hurt the other person and take longer and then just be like, oh, I was just taking a break. You're just not being patient. You want to be careful that you're not turning it into a manipulation or a weapon of any kind. Beware of that and be honest with yourself. Like a helpful phrase that you can say is, I care about this conversation, but I need a few minutes to calm down so I can respond better. I tell that to my kids all the time, and they're pretty respectful of that, especially if they know they're not going to get a good result if they keep poking the bear and pushing me. Now for her third question. Jen said, how can I communicate my feelings without sounding critical or attacking? So before I go into the next question, I do want to say that sometimes things are so activating and you're so used to these patterns of escalated conflict that you have to start even smaller. When I first started with my husband, after we had built a lot of resentments around communication, I was like, okay, I can't even see his face because I know I'm not going to be my best self. I'm going to snap at him. I'm going to get reactive. So then I started doing voice messages. I started doing audio texts, and that really helped. And then I didn't have to see his face. I could take more ownership. And then when he responded, I could think about it before just reacting back. And that got us back in a better habit of doing that. And slowly but surely, we could do it face to face as well. And this helps my clients too. All right, now for Jen's third question. How can I communicate my feelings without sounding critical or attacking? It is definitely not always easy. Most people communicate accusations, so share more about your experience, how you feel, how you felt, the story you were telling yourself, any of that stuff, but you don't have to get it too drawn out too. Some of them require bigger ones, but like in the example of my husband and our couples council that we do each Sunday, he just kept it very brief and simple, and that prevented it from getting so big. So it depends on what it is, but criticism really does create defensiveness. So if you're being at all critical in a way that you know that they are sensitive to, steer away from that. Use different words. Be wise. For example, there's certain ways that my husband grew up that I know from being married for 21 years that I cannot say without it escalating into an argument that will be difficult to repair very quickly. So there's certain words and triggers of his that I am very careful about. Not that I'm not willing to explore and talk about with him, but that I'm very careful that it doesn't sound like a criticism in a way that can harm him more, if that makes sense. So instead of saying something like, you never listen, you never do this, always make me feel, you always do this, you never do this, of course that's going to make people defensive. Try instead, I feel hurt when I have to ask several times for you to take out the trash when that's something that we agreed to. Like you're going to cover this and I'll cover this unless you communicate that you aren't able to, and then I can step in and help. Again, it can be much shorter than that. But another one could be, I felt disconnected when you didn't come to bed at 9 o'clock when we talked about so we could connect before going to bed. Something like that. Remember in this that tone matters as much as content. So watch your tone. Timing also matters. My husband and I realized pretty quickly that it is not wise to talk while in bed right before we're falling asleep, because then we get more and more frustrated. The more tired we become, we're definitely not our best selves. So we're like, no, we just can't keep doing that. Why do we keep thinking this is going to work when it never does? The next thing is delivery matters. Make sure you're delivering it like you would deliver it to a best friend, somebody that you love and care about. Obviously, you love and care about other people as well, but talk like you're talking to a friend, giving them that curiosity, the benefit of the doubt, just exploring it, and don't be so rude and resentful, even if you feel that bubbling up inside. Try to be honest and respectful, but you don't have to overshare. My husband and I got in that habit too for a while. Both of us, but especially my husband. I think he's more of a verbal processor, so he wasn't trying to be unkind, but he gave too much information that I later had to be like, I don't need to hear all of that. Can you process that in a journal or with a friend, a trusted friend, or somebody, a counselor, something where I don't have to carry all of that because that's a little overwhelming. As I'm talking about this, I hope you can recognize that just because I'm giving you a lot of examples about my husband and I does not mean we have a bad relationship. I think that is a common misconception that if there's any conflict, that's not a healthy relationship. And I would say otherwise. If you are not working through those things, that is the true problem. Because healthy conflict draws you closer together. Just like our friends that talk to us, it didn't have to be this huge, big deal. And when they did, we felt so much closer to them than other friends that we've had that we can tell through either example or their defensiveness that they're not people that we can feel fully safe with talking through all conflict. So remember that in your relationships. It's not a bad thing. And remember also that, so really try to refrain from emotionally attacking somebody. Despite those resentments or anything that's going on you, that's why you want to really make sure you're grounded and have to process some of these things as much as you can before you're jumping in and talking about it with somebody else. Especially if there's that pattern there of getting defensive and reactive and things, and those things that I mentioned earlier. Now for question number 4. What's the difference between healthy conflict and toxic conflict? Some of those things I've already mentioned, but that healthy conflict involves listening and empathy, involves repair and calm pauses, taking ownership, those boundaries that I mentioned, curiosity, and emotional safety. As you do those things, people feel emotionally safe. And then toxic conflict involves contempt, sarcasm, humiliation, yelling, scorekeeping, that's a big one in marriages or partnerships, shutting down, threats, and personal attacks. If you are really heaping on that shame and really want them to feel like they are less than, they're a bad person, that's in that toxic conflict range. Even if they did something, please remember there's always two sides of the street. There's always two different perspectives. And what I've learned again and again with my kids is that when I take the time to listen and have curiosity, more often than not, they have a valid point. I just don't see it in the moment. So I think that I'm clearly right. But as we work through it, I'm like, oh, okay, that generally makes sense. Not always, but often. Just remember that healthy conflict seeks understanding and toxic conflict seeks control or victory or emotional punishment. Be honest with yourself. When conflict happens, are you trying to punish the other person? Are you trying to win more than anything else? Or are you trying to seek control? Because if you are, that goes into that toxic conflict. All right, last question for part 1 today. How do I stay calm during conflict when my nervous system immediately goes into fight, flight, or freeze? Very valid. I would say most people, this happens to them. And what I have learned to do for myself and what I've seen my clients do is remember that fight, flight, or freeze that happens when we feel activated, when we feel like there's a threat. It's almost impossible to think clearly and to respond in adaptive ways, healthy, productive ways. So taking that time out is wise and smart until you feel regulated. And remember that emotional regulation matters more than winning. Winning is not going to help if you are flooded. You're really not going to win no matter what if you're flooded. So here are some regulation ideas that can help you. You probably have heard of many of them. deep breathing exercises, even listening to something on your phone, or there's so many free ones on YouTube or otherwise about grounding exercises or little meditations that are very brief, even just a couple minutes. You can relax your shoulders and your jaw. You can put your face in the freezer. You can walk around the block or even just walk outside. Movement, walking, go to the gym, delaying that conversation until you're calmer, all of these things help. If you didn't grow up with this being modeled, you have to practice a lot more than other people, and that's okay. Calm is a skill, and emotional regulation improves with repetition and awareness. Just remember, it's not for you, it's for your entire family. This is going to help everybody. And I have had to work at it more than I expected because I think I was a relatively calm kid, but I was really just shoving it all down. So it's starting to leak out later in life with all these resentments and triggers that I didn't even know were really there because I had just been a relatively calm child. So that might be you. Just remember that conflict patterns are often learned, but they're not permanent, and emotional maturity is built slowly through more awareness and intentional practice. Every healthy conversation you have changes that atmosphere in your home and that atmosphere with your friends or loved ones, and it can work. I know so many of us are terrified of these things, but true joy and fulfillment comes as we lean into that. Sometimes people are not going to accept it or be willing to, but we also have to accept that we can't control everyone else. And if that invitation falls flat, well, we've done what we can. Maybe we can revisit it a little bit later, maybe not, but we'll go more into that into part 2. So in part 2, we're going to talk about boundaries, repair those difficult personalities, and emotional safety, and what to do when the other person isn't communicating in healthy ways. That's an important part 2 of that. So stay tuned for that. And don't forget to check out fulfillmenttherapy.org for our courses to take fulfillment to the next level, or you can sign up for coaching there as well. Very reasonable rates. If you just feel stuck and you want to improve into small ways with one session or several, you're welcome to do so. And I will see you back here shortly for part 2. Hey friends, if you enjoyed this episode, a quick 30-second share can help someone else find support and help this podcast grow. Leaving a review on Apple Podcasts boosts visibility and keeps the show alive. Your simple acts make a big difference. I'll see you back here each week for more life-changing episodes.